Previously on the Leaky Bucket podcast.
Over that period of time, as I got more responsibility, as things went on, it started to dawn on me what a toxic and stressful industry this was that I was in, actually. And a lot of the time you'd be working on multi-million pound building projects with a very tight deadline. It was like being in a pressure cooker. But the more senior I got as well, I was exposed to a real dark side of kind of like corporate life as well. There were a lot of bullies. There were a lot of people that would very easily throw you under the bus at a second's notice to protect themselves when you've done absolutely nothing wrong. There was a lot of gossip, and it was just really like a horrible, toxic pressure cooker environment with a lot of very nasty people in it.
Hi there, and welcome to the Leaky Bucket podcast. I'm your host, Ian Morgan, and this is the financial performance podcast for entrepreneurs looking to get a better understanding of their numbers, to plug the leaks in their business, and to move from surviving to thriving. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Leaky Bucket podcast. Today we have with us Kevin Palmieri, who is the founder and co-host of Next Level University podcast. Early in his life, Kevin found success, but after a brush with suicide, he realized he wasn't even living a life he truly wanted, became passionate about self-improvement, and decided to make it his purpose in life to impact as many people as possible by becoming a role model, podcaster, and speaker. He succeeded to make his podcast one of the top 100 with over 1,000 episodes and listened to in over 125 countries, and I believe over 600,000 downloads. And it's taken his life to the next level and achieved both personal and professional success. Kevin, welcome to the show.
Ian, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to chat, and hopefully I can live up to the wonderful introduction.
Fantastic. Kevin, let's just get the audience, get a feel for you and get to know you. Obviously, I've said all about the podcast and that side of stuff, but in your opinion, is that what you're most well known for?
Yeah, if it wasn't for the podcast, I wouldn't be here talking to you. Nobody would know who I am, and I don't know. I mean, honestly, I don't even know if I'd be alive. So yeah, the podcast really is the biggest thing that we have, and that has offered me a lot of opportunity that I didn't have in the beginning. Fantastic.
What do people tend to misjudge about you the most, Kevin?
Oh man, probably I think people hear a quote unquote successful podcast and they assume that life is either really easy or there's not a lot going on, or I don't work a lot and it's just kind of like take it easy. Although we're the most successful quote unquote we've ever been, my life is more challenging than it's ever been. I work more than I ever have, and there's definitely more pressure than there's ever been. It's a more aligned positive pressure, but I think oftentimes people would look and say, wow, they must have a really easy life, when our life is very challenging, but it's also very fulfilling, which makes it worth it.
Brilliant. What are the three most important values that you live by?
I would say number one, humility. Number two is kindness. And then number three, I would say, is consistency. I really feel like when you're trying hard things, you are going to get consistently humbled. And that's great. It's really, really good to go out there and fail, because it makes you stay humble. And I think that's super important. I value kindness at such a high level because I don't ever want to forget that a lot of what I'm doing, I'm blessed to be doing. And just because somebody's not quote unquote changing the world in the way that we are doesn't mean they're not changing the world in their own unique way. And I want to make sure I'm respectful and kind when it comes to that. And then consistency. I value doing things that are going to help us win. I value showing up every day and adding value, or making sure I'm doing the habits that will ultimately bring success in my life.
Fantastic. Kevin always brings some interesting answers, right? But would you rather win with no issues at all, or would you rather fall short and learn something new?
I heard this because I listened to the latest episode. I would rather learn something new and fall short, because the other one isn't sustainable. I mean, if every time you did something you won, you would never learn anything new. You would only know what quote unquote seems to work. But That's the interesting thing, Ian, is I have failed so much over the last 5 years. And in the very beginning, I was so afraid of failure. I didn't understand how failure could be productive or constructive. And I've really, really worked on my relationship with that. So definitely that one. And I think that's the ultimate goal for everybody to get to that place, because that's the way to get out of your comfort zone. That's the way to grow. That's the way to impact it. That really is the key to life, is understanding that behind every failure is a lesson that will help you avoid another failure in the beginning, in the future, excuse
me. And then, Kevin, success, a lot of people are chasing success, right? But what does success look like for you?
Success to me, it's changed so much over the last few years. Success is being healthy, it's being wealthy, and it's being deeply in love. I think that a lot of us think, well, if I have a certain number in the bank, I'm successful. But we might not take care of our bodies or our relationships. So yeah, I want to have the most successful business I can in terms of profitability, in terms of impact, and in terms of mastery. I want to get really, really good at what I'm doing. I want to be healthy as humanly possible, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And I want my relationship to be absolutely magnificent. I want to be a supportive partner. I want to have a supportive partner. I want my wife to feel like I'm pouring into her cup. A lot of people are aiming for one bucket. They say, well, if I could have this amount of money, everything else fixes itself. It doesn't. I found that out the hard way. And that's why my unique version of success is the way it is, because at one point it was just make a boatload of money and everything else will be fine.
Brilliant. And given all of those areas, right, the health, the wealth, the love, are you currently successful?
Yeah, I'm definitely the most successful I've ever been. I got married a couple months ago. Our business has been doubling in revenue year over year, which is amazing. And then I've been crushing the gym and crushing mobility and having my salads and making sure I'm not consuming too much caffeine. And yeah, I would say overall, holistically, I am the most successful, and I'm also the most fulfilled. And that's definitely part of success for me as well.
Brilliant. Right, thanks for that sort of quick rundown and quick introduction for you.
Of course.
Into you. So let's go backwards for a bit first, right? Tell me about your early life and everything that sort of led you to what you're now doing.
Yeah, so I was raised by my mom and my grandmother. I did not know my father. I did not meet my father until I was 27. I was raised in a lower middle class family for sure. We didn't have a lot of money. We often talked about how we were going to pay rent. That was a common conversation that I remember having. But other than that, I had a pretty normal childhood, quote unquote, whatever normal means. I used to ride my bike around and with my friends, we used to play baseball. We used to go down to the baseball fields at night and watch the games. And the one thing that was different about me is, number one, I absolutely hated school. I never enjoyed school. And I realized pretty quickly, Ian, that I was not going to go to college. I didn't care if I got into college. I didn't care. I was not going to go to college. So after high school, all my friends went away to college. I stayed back and I started working at a gas station, and I pumped gas for a few years. And then I just job hopped. I went from pumping gas to, I was a personal trainer. I was a truck driver. I was a forklift operator. I worked at a hospital. I was doing a bunch of different stuff. But eventually I got this unique opportunity in the weatherization industry. And all that means is it was my job to go into a building and make it more energy efficient. So we would work in schools, we'd work on the doors, we'd work on the windows, we'd work in the attic. Our goal was to save energy. The beautiful thing about this is, since we worked on state buildings, we got paid the state rate. And all that means is the state determines how much money you get paid an hour, not your company. So I was making anywhere from $60 to $120 an hour. And for a 23, 24-year-old kid who has no college degree, that's a really, really, really good amount of money. That's quite literally life-changing. So if you looked at me when I was in my mid-20s, particularly 25, you would see a young man who had a model girlfriend. My girlfriend was a model. I had a sports car. I had a high-paying job. I had just done a bodybuilding show, so I was in the best shape of my life. I had a new apartment. Everything from the outside seemed like it was just fantastic. But inside, I was super insecure. I was afraid of everything. I was scarce. I was not fulfilled. I was miserable. And one day, my girlfriend came to me and she told me that she wanted to move across the country. So we live on the East Coast of the United States. She wanted to move to the West Coast. And I gave her every reason in the world why she shouldn't do it, because I was so afraid of being left behind. I was afraid of failing. I just needed certainty. I was so scared. She ended up leaving me and moving across the country, and that's exactly what she should have done. But when she left me, I didn't know what to do. I wanted to work on myself. I wanted to practice self-improvement, but I convinced myself that if I just made more money, then that void that I felt, that pain that I felt, all of that would go away. So the next year I said, okay, I'm going to make the most money I've ever made in my entire life. This was when I was 26. And I ended up getting a promotion that year. So I got promoted to a foreman at my company. All that means is I was starting the job, I was running the job, and then I was closing the job out. So I was working a lot of hours. That year was the craziest year we had ever had as a company. And we got a bunch of contracts to work in other states. So if you fast forward to the end of that year, I had been on the road for 10 months out of the 12 months, every single week, living in a different state, living in a different hotel, driving 6 hours, 8 hours, 12 hours, whatever it is, and just grinding and staying up for days on end. It was brutal. It was brutal. But I was making money and I didn't care. Now we got to the end of that year. I had my final pay stub in hand and I said, this is it. I'm going to do it. So I opened up my final pay stub and I made $100,000 at 26. But I had another one of those moments very similar to before my girlfriend left me, where it looked like I was crushing it. I had all the markers of success, but that $100,000 did not make me any happier. It did not make me any more fulfilled. It didn't make me any more confident. It didn't make me feel like I had purpose. And in that moment, I realized that for most of my life, I had lived unconsciously, definitely that previous year, unconsciously. The opposite of unconscious is hyperconscious. So I started a podcast called the Hyperconscious Podcast. And upon starting the podcast, I fell in love with that as I fell out of love with my job. And after I opened that pay stub, I knew that that job was not forever. And I knew that there was a time limit on that job. And I start calling out of work. I start leaving the job site early. I'm showing up late. And it got to the point where I would have to be 6 hours away from where I lived on Monday morning at 7 a.m. to start the job. I would sleep in my bed on Sunday night from midnight until, from 9 p.m. until midnight. I would get up and then I would drive 6 hours straight to the job site. I'd work an 8-hour day and then I would go to the gym because I was just so miserable. I needed to be home. I couldn't stay another night in a hotel. And it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And eventually it got to the point where I was in a hotel room in New Jersey, which is 6 hours from where I lived. My alarm clock went off at 5:15 in the morning. I sat up. I slid to the edge of the bed. I was lacing up my work boots. I had done this 1,000 times. But that morning, it was different. It was like there was 10 televisions on in my head at the same time, and every single one was on a different station. One was saying, you're stuck here forever. I know you want to leave, but too bad, you can't. If you do find the courage to leave, what are your friends going to think? What's your family going to think? And do you really think you're going to do this podcast thing and this is going to become your job, your career? That's not going to happen. And in that moment, I felt like if I was to take my life, I would take my problems with me. Now, one of the things I talk about often, and I heavily speak on this, is the importance of the people around you. At the time, I had a mentor who was also one of my best friends, and he is now my business partner and the CEO of our company. I reached out to him and I said, hey, Alan, I'm really struggling. I'm having these dark thoughts. I don't know what to do. I'm miserable. I'm depressed. What do I do? And he said, Kev, so much has changed for you over the last couple of years in terms of your awareness, but your environments have stayed the same. I think you need to change your environment. So 3 or 4 months later, I ended up leaving that job. And then I went full time into podcasting. And in the beginning, we were extremely broke. We were not making any money. Nobody was listening. And then we just kept going. We kept going. That was really the shift for me, is when I left my job and I went full time into what we were doing with no plan B. I mean, when you're in that position, number one, when you're that miserable and you're debating taking your life or thinking that the world would be a better place if you weren't in it, there's not much to go down from there. So when I went all in, I think that's really when it was like, all right, there's no plan B. I'm not getting another job. This has to be it. We have to find a way to make this work. And every day since then, we've been trying to get a little bit better and trying to help more people. And that's really how it started.
Fantastic. A lot going on there, Kevin, and over those years. But actually, yeah, it's great in terms of actually, like, I think people, we mentioned earlier, actually, people can easily chase the money and the wealth. And actually, yeah, you've been there, done that. And actually, they think actually what happens is that paycheck comes and then, oh yeah, but I'm happy. Like, and the reality often is, yeah, that's not the case. It's the balance, isn't it, of everything, of actually, there's no doubt that money makes things a lot easier. But actually, it does not make you happy. There needs to be that balance, like you say, and you need to have the health, the love, and everything else around you as well.
Yeah. It's interesting though, Ian, because if you want to think about it, if you want to say money buys happiness, I'm okay with that. And here's why. Happiness is results, right? Money can buy happiness, can buy pleasure. Money is not going to buy you fulfillment. And I think at the end of the day, that's what everybody's really after, is fulfillment. And think about it this way. If you've ever done anything charitable where you donated your time, you donated your money, you donated your energy, you donated something, you didn't make any money, but I bet you were fulfilled. And that's just, but you also might have been miserable in the process, right? If it's cold out and you're doing something, you're handing out food or whatever it is, you might be freezing your butt off saying, oh my goodness, this is brutal. But when you go home, you look back and say, wow, I'm really glad I did that. That's fulfillment. Fulfillment versus happiness, they're two different things.
Yeah, no, it's good little concept. Like the way of looking at happiness is, it's a feeling and emotion, and fulfillment is actually the overall result and outcome. I like that look. Kevin, what do you think your biggest successes are within business?
Oh man, I would say it's interesting because you have breadth and you have depth. You have breadth is the amount of people you can impact, and you have depth, the level of impact that you can instill on a human. I would say the biggest success is we kind of have both. I mean, we're coming up on 700,000 downloads, which I'm super grateful for, and that's awesome. That means we've had 700,000, not necessarily people, because some people listen to multiple episodes, but just say for the sake of this, we've had 700,000 people who have had their life impacted in some way, shape, or form. But we've also helped, I don't know, hundreds at this point behind the scenes. So I think it's that unique balance of, I think of our success as we're able to help anybody who has access to the internet, but we're also able to help people who want to take a deeper dive into their own self-awareness, their own self-improvement, their business. That's really success to me, is no matter where you are, we can help you. I feel really good about that. Our business isn't set up where if you don't have any money, you're of no value to us. That's not the way our business is set up. So I think the sustainability of our business and the impact that we're having, I would say that's probably the biggest success.
Yeah, like it. I think obviously Simon Sinek talks about having a why and a purpose, and something bigger than what you could probably ever achieve. And we have this mission, I suppose, if you like, which is to help business owners everywhere be thriving, not just surviving. But the reality is that those people who are able to pay and work with us is limited. That's not everybody has that luxury and that opportunity. And one of the reasons for us launching and starting the podcast was actually we can start to impact people who that's not an option, because they're not at that stage, or they don't have the the funds available or whatever. So I think having that the breadth and the depth, good, like it. What about your challenges though, Kevin? What's been your biggest challenge, and what did you learn from it though, more importantly?
I would say my biggest challenge, and this was from the very beginning, was understanding money, understanding wealth, and fixing my relationship with money. There was a time where Alan's my business partner, we were in our studio, and I remember sitting down, Alan, and we were going through our numbers. And I think my part of the business at that point, because we weren't combined yet, we weren't like actually running everything through the business. But at that point, I think I was making like $8,000 a month. And I remember saying to Alan, I said, I don't understand why I'm so broke. Like, I get to the end of the month and I don't have any money, but like, look at how much I'm making. I'm making a ton of money. And I think at the time, Alan was making like $4,000 a month, but he was keeping like 90%, and I was keeping like 20%. And I remember we had this conversation. He said, Kev, because you don't understand how to optimize your expenses. Like every time you get to a new quote unquote bracket, you find a way to spend more money. Like it's just not sustainable. You'll be broke forever if you keep living this way. And it was like, oh my goodness, I can't believe that's what's happening. So yeah, I would say really understanding and reformulating my relationship with money to try not to live. Now it's a fine line, right? Try not to live as scarcely when it comes to letting money go on necessities, but also don't live so abundantly that you're spending money that you don't have to. That's been a really important understanding for me. And especially as somebody who's more certainty driven than probably your average entrepreneur. In the beginning, it was brutal, not knowing how I was going to pay my bills and not being able to buy Christmas presents for my wife. The first couple of years, that was brutal. So reformulating my relationship with money and then making sure I'm continuously learning. And it's helped me in so many ways. I mean, when you're broke, you have to learn how to stretch a dollar. When you're making a good amount of money and you can still stretch a dollar, it's almost like you're making more money. So it's helped me in numerous ways. Now I understand numbers, data, spreadsheets at a much deeper level than I ever wanted to or expected to. And that's just another benefit of having to learn it all. Oftentimes it's the darkest holes that create the brightest spots for us in the future. If you're struggling with something, the odds of you ever struggling with that again, if you learn enough about it, are way lower. It's the pain and the necessity that forces us to learn things that we can use forever.
Kevin, I know you've got some key beliefs that I know that you sort of follow and things, right? So let's pick one. I know you argue that actually being vulnerable is extremely important. I think there's plenty of people out there maybe who are business owners and think, oh yeah, but I can't be vulnerable in front of my team, in front of customers, in front of potential customers. Why do you view that you do need to be vulnerable?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, the level of your relationships is directly correlated with the level of vulnerability in them. So if you want your relationships with your team to be really, really good, I would say you need to be vulnerable. If you want your relationships with your clients or your manufacturer, whoever it is, all vulnerability really means is living in the truth. So I think it's super important because when you lead by example, other people feel safe to express. I literally had somebody on the team message me 3 days ago and say, I'm so grateful that you have led the charge when it comes to expressing your feelings because I feel very safe to do that now. And that's awesome. I'm so grateful for that. But even at a deeper level, it starts with you being vulnerable with yourself. Like, what's real? Have you been letting yourself down recently? Have you been saying, I'm going to get up and go to the gym and you're not, and that's hurting your self-worth? Have you been saying you're going to be a better partner and you haven't been? Vulnerability is you being honest with yourself, and then that carries over to other aspects of life. I think it's the only way to live. Now, and honestly, am I great at it? In certain arenas, I'm really good at it. But other times it's really challenging. It's challenging to be vulnerable. You have to live in the truth. If you're not living in the truth, nothing is going to be as aligned as it could be. And this is the other thing too. And all business owners, I think business is taking a different turn than it ever has, where you don't necessarily have to have it all figured out. Just because you're in charge doesn't mean you have to know everything. You're a human. You have feelings. You have emotions. You have failures. You have fears. It doesn't necessarily hurt your credibility to let other people know that. It actually helps you connect with people. And we're in an interesting time where you have to get people to understand and buy into the mission. If people aren't bought into the mission, it doesn't matter who's leading. It really doesn't, because there's no emotion there. Emotion's a good thing if you can run it more than it runs you. It's important to have that.
Yeah, I think one thing we learned, so I don't know, probably about 5-6 years ago now, I started joining various mastermind groups. And it was never the intention actually to join the mastermind groups to go and win clients and work. It was actually to grow myself, because I felt I'd reached a ceiling in terms of where I could lead the business to, and I needed to get uncomfortable and learn new things. And actually, through just being there and being vulnerable, explaining the challenges and the issues that we got and what we're trying to overcome, yeah, naturally you just made connections, and then people want to work with us because they're like, Yeah, but you're just real, you're genuine. And yeah, so definitely couldn't agree more. Also, lying to yourself, right? I think it's probably you're the easiest person to lie to. And I think we do it in subtle ways. And I was only talking about this. I was a guest on another podcast recently, right? And I was talking about this. And it was that there was a period of time where ultimately I wasn't being successful. I worked too many hours and I didn't earn enough money. But when asked the question of like, how's business? I used to define it by going, oh yeah, well, we've got X amount of clients. There's loads. And effectively it was a way of me lying to myself to define that was being successful. I now sort of make an effort. If I ever find I'm doing that, like I said to somebody earlier, actually, I said, oh, we're really busy at the moment. And I was like, hang on, let me quantify that. We are good busy, right? I'm not 100-hour a week busy. I'm working 25, 30 hours. I'm good, but I'm busy in terms of we've got more clients than what we can cope with. There's a good pipeline and so on. So I make some efforts to catch myself and make sure it's not a lie, but I know that the words that have come out of my mouth could be interpreted in that way and I could fall back into those traps. What do you do to catch yourself and make sure that actually, am I being vulnerable? Am I being honest with myself?
I try to ask myself a simple but powerful question. I say, what would the best version of Kevin do? And I know it sounds cliche and it probably sounds overly simplistic, but I really try to do that. In terms of vulnerability, this is my understanding. Two sides to look at this. Number one, either you get the feedback along the way or you get the feedback all at once at the end. When it comes to vulnerability, it's the opposite. Either you give the feedback, aka the truth, little by little by little, or it gets to the point where it might seem impossible to actually express your truth because it's so far gone and it's too much. It's been held on for way too long. So what I try to do is say, well, if I don't say this now, it's going to be twice as hard to bring it up next time. That's one way I do that. But everything else is really, what would the best version of Kevin do? Or is this good for my health? Is this ideal for my health? Is this ideal for my wealth? Is this ideal for my relationship? On social media, there's a ton of rabbit holes where, you can get lost down people in bikinis and people in mansions and all this stuff. And I will literally ask myself, is me clicking on this beautiful person in a bikini what's best for my relationship? Yes or no? No. Okay, then let's not waste our time here, because that's all you're going to get. That's all you're going to get is that momentary feel-good drug, and then it's going to be on to the next thing. So yeah, I try to ask myself questions that I think a coach would ask me, and then answer them as really as I can, as honestly and aligned as I can, because I know nobody else can answer them as well as I can.
Hey there. Really sorry for interrupting, but I really wanted to let you know about some amazing bonus content we have available for you. You see, not only do we record behind the scenes, but also we go deeper into some of the key topics that come up during the conversation. Now, you can find out more about this and access all of it free of charge over on Facebook. Just search for the Leaky Bucket Podcast Community. You mentioned about obviously trying to position yourself as a coach in that instance. Do you have coaches around you, or do you rely on, is it Alan, your business partner? Who are the influential people? What do they bring?
Yeah, for a while we had at one point we had 5 or 6 mentors that we were talking to every week. And then it became this interesting thing where we were getting a bunch of different advice about different things from different people, but nobody had ever done what we were trying to do. Like in the grand scheme of things, none of our mentors had really done that. So we tried to just pick and choose. Oh, you're really good at this. You're really good at this. You're really good at this. And then it slowly leaked into let's really find mentors that are the most aligned from a character standpoint. Because I think a lot of other people are kind of playing the game of, well, this is what worked for me. Maybe they got lucky. They don't necessarily know what worked for them. So yeah, that's really how it shifted. Right now, Alan is my main mentor for sure. He studied self-improvement for basically his whole life, and he's also very much a genius. And then I would say our other main mentor is probably Evan Carmichael. Evan's big on YouTube. He's spoken with Tony Robbins. He's big time in our industry. We're actually going to Toronto. He messaged us the other day. He asked if we would come up and interview him, which is wild because at the beginning of this journey, I didn't think he'd ever want to talk to us, it just shows how fast things change. But yeah, he's been instrumental in our growth. He got us to change our name. He challenged us to go from 2 or 3 episodes to like 4 or 5. He's always challenged us, but he has a really aligned character, and he's somebody who understands the long game. I mean, he posted 3 videos a day every day for like 5 years before he ever quote unquote made it. And that's us in a nutshell too. So yeah, Alan's number 1 for me. And in terms of the business, I would say Evan Carmichael is the biggest one for us.
Kevin, obviously this is the Leaky Bucket podcast, right? And the leaky bucket effect, the way we see it, is when people get so hung on chasing the next sale and growing the business that actually all the little issues that are going on that they're probably aware of, they just don't get enough attention. And all of a sudden they become much bigger issues and possibly stop you reaching the next level of success, but certainly will stop you staying successful if you switch off the grind and chasing new customers. What do you do to make sure that you're aware of the leaks that are going on in your business?
Yeah, so right now we have 26 departments in our business. And every single week we have a meeting for every single department. So whether it's social media, whether it's marketing, whether it's the podcast, finance, whatever, every single week we have a meeting, and I'm not on all of them because I'm not in all the departments. But what we do is we do a 1% win and a 1% improvement. What is the win that we had this week? We got 4 new clients. Cool. Awesome. What is the 1% improvement? Our standard operating procedure needs to improve because although we got 4 new clients, the onboarding was garbage. It needs to be better. So it very much is, we celebrate the wins by 1%, and then we focus on the failures or room for improvement by 1%. And we're doing that every single day, whether it's on a personal level. So every single day I track my 27 habits or whatever I'm doing. I get a score at the end, say it's 95%. Most important win, I was really productive today. I had some great podcasts. Most important improvement, I got lost in social media land for 20 minutes when I shouldn't have. So it's really that. It's just the small stuff on the day-to-day.
Yeah, I like that. As the margins are always hidden in those 1%. But I think there's a story actually about I think it might be the 2012 GB cycling team who actually it started. I think they had really poor set of results back in like 2004 Olympics or whatever. And actually they just went for, how do you find all the little 1%? And I don't remember how many medals they got in 2012, but significant improvement. And they couldn't put it down to one thing. It was all these little minor improvements.
And stuff you could never connect. Like one of them was, we're going to teach you how to wash your hands better so you don't get sick and you're more well rested so you don't miss time. Like you would never connect washing your hands to becoming a world-class cycling team, but that is part of it. A lot of that was in Atomic Habits. That's where I learned about that originally by James Clear. Atomic Habits is where I got that.
Yeah, that's what I picked up as well. Yeah. Lots of people think that success comes really easy, right? But the truth is that there's always stuff that needs attention and needs fixing. Just give a little insight. What are the current things that you're trying to fix right now?
For a long time, we were anti-marketing. And all I mean by that is a lot of other people, I'll put it this way. I don't have anything against McDonald's, but I've never gotten a Big Mac that looks like it does in the commercials. It's never looked that way when I've gotten it. And I don't know if I'm just getting unlucky, but I have a feeling that's probably because they create that in the lab and they take these pictures and it's not real. For a lot of people, I think marketing is about making you look way better than you actually are. We had a block around marketing because that's what we assumed we had to do. Now it's, why don't we just make our lives on social media look like they actually are? Like we don't have to fake it. We have everything we actually talk about. Let's just show a more accurate representation of what's actually happening. That's a big focus for us right now. And then I would say it's time. It's trying to figure out, when you're maxed out on time, how do you become more productive? When you don't have any more calendar slots available, what do you do? How do you habit stack? How do you be more productive? It's very much there's very little opportunity for mistakes in terms of missing things. So it's very just regimented. Now is extra grind time for where we are in the business. But yeah, the block around marketing is something we're working on a ton. And then trying to make sure all of our systems are improving as our results do.
So obviously you've got all this sort of stabilized, systemized, and everything that's running as well as it is at the moment. When was a time though when you realized you had a problem, but you just didn't have the answers? And what did you do?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm heading the department. So I created a department called Next Level Podcast Solutions. And all that means is we help people with podcasts. You don't need to know any details. But I remember having a conversation with Alan, and I had lost sight of everything that was happening with the clients. I'm really good at getting something started. I'm not necessarily good at improving it as I go. I'm an operator. I can get something going and then I'm off to the races. My problem was I didn't know how to create SOPs. I didn't know how to measure the success. I didn't know how to do the small improvements. So I sat down with Alan and we had a brainstorming session of, okay, well, what's the system you're running? And I said, I get clients and then they come. And he's like, all right, then what? And I said, then this happens. And he's like, well, what happens after that? And I said, I don't really know. I haven't gotten that far yet. For me, it was creating long-term sustainability. I was really good at getting trains rolling. I was not really good at setting up the track so those trains can roll for a long period of time. And I went to Alan on that. And then I also did a deep dive with a lot of business books. It was very much like, okay, I need to understand business at a deeper level because I might understand podcasting, but I didn't understand the business side of things. So it was going to Alan, going to a mentor, and then going to books and content.
Brilliant. Kevin, I think where do I want to go? If from all the challenges and things that you've had to try and get yourself through to the point of now where everything feels that bit more under control and you don't have the chaos going on around you, if you had to give the listeners who are still in that chaotic mode maybe at the moment, if there was one key lesson and one key action maybe that they were going to take today that was really going to have an improvement, what would it be from your view?
Man, it would probably be, I don't know. I think my natural tendency would be to make sure you're actually measuring what you're doing. That's been the biggest thing that's been most instrumental for me, is like just tracking my habits. Understanding when I wake up tomorrow, I know exactly what I should be doing. And if I'm not getting the results I want, I have to go there first. It leaves a lot less up to the imagination, right? I did X amount of calls, I got X amount of results versus I have no idea why things aren't working the way they're supposed to. So I would say measuring is super important. That's a big part of it. Understanding the data behind everything you're doing is big. I think the other thing too is two things. One, and you said this earlier, I don't know if we were on air, but you said you have to be very, very honest with what you're good at, and you have to be very, very honest with what you're not good at. I would triple down on what you're good at and find a way to delegate what you're not good at. And then at the deepest level, I would try, and I don't know if this is going to land, but stop trying to be somebody else and try to be the best version of you. Because just because you're doing what you're doing doesn't mean you're supposed to be number one in the world. And if you're living your life that way, that might be in direct resistance to who you are as a human being. For a long time, I was trying to be like Alan or like other people, when in reality, that's just not who I am. I'm not a math genius who has a background in electrical and computer engineering. That's just not who I am. I'm not that person. So I tried to lean into my strengths to double down on those strengths and bring those strengths in unique ways.
Yeah, I like that, because actually in reality, right, what the business doesn't need is two Kevins or two Alans. Yeah, actually, the reason it works is because both of you bring different strengths to the table, and you can complement each other.
Yep.
But actually, I think a key hiring mistake that most people make probably is their first hire is they go and look for a mini me and go, oh yeah, I could just do that. And then actually now I don't know if you're great at sales, now you've got two people who are great at sales, but nobody's doing the finances.
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, that's not a great result.
Yeah.
So yeah. And when for you, right, if you're finding like your high performance and sweet spot, are you sort of a morning person? You're sort of late evening? Where are you at? Where do you get all your best work done?
It's interesting you ask. I literally sent Alan a message yesterday or today. I am a morning person. So if I can get up, so it's Wednesday, we're recording this on Wednesday. Monday and Tuesday, I got up at 4:15. Today, I got up at 4:15 as well. I'm at the gym by 4:45. I'm home from the gym by like 6:15, showered and in the office by 6:45. Then I don't do my first call until 10 a.m. I have 3 hours to do back office work and do like get the big rocks moved. That for me, nothing beats that. Nothing beats that. So my ideal day is up at 4 and I'm probably working till 6 p.m. And then after that, my phone stays in the office and I'm spending time with my wife. That's the best, absolute best schedule for me.
Brilliant. And obviously you've got opinions and everything within your industry and things that you do. What's your major sort of opinion you have that actually the majority of the people within the industry disagree with you?
Yeah, simple. You really shouldn't be a successful podcaster by doing less of the work. Because less of the work usually equates to less value. And the only way, not the only way, the most aligned way for most podcasters to win is to add more value than everybody else. Most people aren't going to be Joe Rogan. Statistically, it just doesn't work that way. So you have to add more value than everybody else. And the other thing too, I would say, is just because it's not scalable does not mean it's not worth mastering. A lot of us are so focused on the supply. I don't want my calendar to fill up. I don't want my calendar to fill up. Worry about that when you have demand. Focus on building demand, not making sure you have enough supply, because most people don't have enough demand. It usually doesn't go the other way in our industry.
Right. Kevin, there's been loads of growth, obviously, in podcasts over the last few years or so. Where do you think it's going?
Oh, man. Now it's going where everybody will have the opportunity to monetize, because different hosts and different platforms, they're going to create opportunities for people to monetize, but it's going to be a very, very, very small level. Right now, I think they're offering, I think it's 1.4 cents per download. So if you crunch the numbers, it's very hard to make a living on that. But it's going more in the way of, a lot of people don't want this to be a hobby. They want to make this their life, their well-being, the way they pay their bills. Okay, let's open up those avenues. I think podcasting is going to keep going towards the importance of video. I really do. Obviously, if you're driving in the car, you can't watch it and you're going to listen. But I think there's a very big space on YouTube for podcasts, because now you can watch YouTube on your phone. You can watch it on your TV. You can stream to the TV. You can watch it everywhere. I think a lot more people are going to consume content on YouTube than ever before. And I think podcasts are that's going to be a big one. So if you're a podcaster who doesn't do video, I would suggest doing video, because I think that's going to be a big leverage point.
And then, Kevin, I might be wrong, but right, I felt like you talked about your early working life with an element of regret, right? If you could go back and you could talk to that 16, 17, 18-year-old self then, right? What would you tell him?
Man, I don't know if it's easy to say I do regret it, but I also understand that I wouldn't be me if I didn't have that. So it's a very fine line. And so much of my work ethic comes from just grinding at stuff I hated. So that's important to understand. It would probably be, Kev, you might be 16 now, but 30 is going to come way quicker than you think it is. You got to figure out what your what your life is going to look like, what's your exit strategy, and what's a sustainable thing for you to do for the rest of your life, because you're probably not going to be able to do whatever you're doing now for the next 50 years. Like your body can't handle it, your mind can't handle it, your relationship can't handle it, your bank account probably can't handle it either. So yeah, I would just try to give him an idea of what the future looks like and tell him, I know 16 seems like you got your life ahead of you. 30 is going to be, it's going to be coming up quick, and everything changes in terms of your life, finances, relationships, living arrangements, all that. I think I forgot, when you go buy a new car and the payment's $450 a month, you don't think about, well, what happens if I lose my job in 2 years? Or if I'm miserable at my job in 2 years and I want to go get another job. I would have tried to just instill more foresight for him.
And whether it's through like the actual podcast or maybe some of the coaching elements and things that you do, is there a particular outcome or something that a client or maybe even a listener has let you know that they achieved off the back of it that actually you just really didn't expect to happen?
Yeah. One of my favorite stories ever, and this was very early in the podcast. I had a listener reach out to me, and she said, I'm afraid to start conversations with people. I'm surrounded by people at school, but I don't know how to start conversations. I'm just nervous. And I said, okay. And this person was local to me. I said, let's go to the mall, and you and I will go to the mall and we'll start having conversations with people, and we'll break this. Like, we will break this today. And she's like, okay. Number one, I did not expect her to say okay. So we went to the mall and we went into a store, and I said, go ask about that beanbag chair. Ask that person about the beanbag chair. I guarantee they're going to start talking to you. And she said, I don't know. This is going to be weird. And I said, just trust me. It's going to be fine. So she went and started a conversation. We went to another store. She started a conversation. Went to another store. She started a conversation. Went to the food court. She started a conversation. And we were getting ready to walk out of the mall that day. And there was these mechanical zoo animals that you could rent, and they had wheels and you could drive around on them. And she said, if we were really brave, we would rent those and drive those around. And I have a video on my phone of us driving those around the mall. Somebody who didn't think they could have a conversation with a stranger ended up driving around the mall in these mechanical zoo animals, not caring what people thought. After that, she ended up going back to college, even though she was told for most of her life that she wasn't smart enough. She got a 3.8 GPA, ended up getting her dream job, and then she ended up coming on the team. And now she works on the team with us, helping us with the mission. So somebody who at the very beginning was too afraid to have a conversation with a stranger has now had conversations with strangers in front of thousands of people on the podcast. And I never would have expected that, because that's such a drastic amount of change in such a short period of time. So yeah, podcast listener ended up becoming somebody who is on the other side of the podcast and helping us now.
Yeah, love that. It's great. And actually, something that really, it comes back to earlier you said about charity. Yeah, right. This is something where you're giving up some of your time. There's not really, at that point, there's probably not a great deal in it for you, apart from possibility, or that there's a small chance that maybe you can feel good because they will go and speak to one person. But yeah, literally the outcome that's come from that is, yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, that was never the plan. Yeah, it was just, if I can help somebody get over that, like, why not? I'm not super busy at this point in the entrepreneurial journey. And I think that goes back to my point before of a lot of people would say, that's not worth my time, or, what's the point of that? It's not scalable. Certain things aren't scalable, but it doesn't mean they're not super valuable.
Yeah. I assume you guys have got some kind of company culture and everything. For you, yeah. What makes a great company culture?
I would say leadership that leads by example, not by words. If you want a good culture, you have to be a good human being who actually practices what you preach. You can't lead from a place of do as I say, not as I do. I think you have to lead from a place of this is what we're doing. I know you can do the same. So for us, it's vulnerability, actually being able to express your feelings. It's consistency. Everybody on our team tracks their habits. We have a very deep belief that if we can help you in your real life, that will help everything. you'll be more productive, you'll be more aligned, you'll be more fulfilled, you'll be more competent, you'll be more confident. If we can help you in your relationship, even though it doesn't have anything to do with the business, that's going to help everything. So our culture is consistent 1% improvement every single day. And that starts from a place of leadership. And yeah, we really want to own that. If we're not getting better, we can't expect you to get better, because that's not fair. That's being a hypocrite.
Good. Thanks, Kevin. And actually, it brings us to a great position. It's been great, actually, you going through all these various areas, but where can people find out more about you? Where can they get in touch? Where can they, see what you guys do?
I always send people to the podcast. I think that's the best bang for your buck. So Next Level University, we're on all the podcast platforms. We're on YouTube as well. A new episode every single day in your pocket from anywhere on the planet for free. That is Next Level U in a nutshell. And if you want to reach out to me directly, you can just search Kevin Palmieri on LinkedIn or Facebook. And my handle is @NeverQuitKid on Instagram. So happy to get back to any questions, comments, concerns. I am there.
Fantastic. And we'll put all of that obviously in the show notes and make sure that all links and everything are there. Kevin, we have a closing tradition on the podcast, and that's this. If you were going to start a new business tomorrow that's completely unrelated to what you currently do, what would it be? And more importantly, probably why?
Oh, man. I would start a music production company, because I think that there are a ton of people out there who are just unreasonably talented, that if they were exposed and they were given momentum, they could crush it. And I love music, so that would be part of it for me, is I get to meet a lot of cool musicians, and that would be a dream come true. So yeah, I would say that a music production company.
Fantastic. Kevin, thank you so much for being on the show.
My pleasure, Ian. I appreciate you.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Leaky Bucket podcast. I'd love it if you could help spread the message by clicking subscribe and leaving a review. Also, please do reach out to me on LinkedIn and let me know your thoughts on this episode. You can also find more info and links in the show notes below. See you next time. Coming next week on the Leaky Bucket podcast.
You're depressed. I was like, oh no, I'm depressed. Shit. So then you start carrying around like a label. I'm depressed, so how am I going to hold myself? Well, like this, and I'm going to talk really slowly, and well, I am depressed. So it was that kind of diagnosis. It was very damaging. So I was like, I need to get back to work, rushed back to work way too quick. Went back in literally the first week of February, and I shouldn't have gone back in. I was nowhere near ready to go back. And they could see that it was harming me in different ways. I wasn't performing right. Long story short, I lost that job. So now I'm jobless. 2 family members passed away. Relationships ended. I'm 30. In my mind, I should have the kids, the house, the white picket fence, the Labrador, like everyone tells you should. And so I've never felt lower at this point. And then another family member died, and I was like, holy shit, what do I do now?